Thanks everyone for making the time to join us. We know that a lot of people are very busy at the moment with what's happening in the world, so we do really appreciate you making the time to learn a bit more about contractor management. So as Sarah said, today is part 4 of 5 of the contractor safety series, and we are going to focus on control, verification, learning and improvement. So you'll notice that Mark Wright's not here, so unfortunately he couldn't make it today, but I've jumped in, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Director of FEFO Consulting, working in the risk and safety space, and also head up the partnership program with FEFO and the Health and Safety Index as well. And as Sarah mentioned, I'm really lucky today to be joined by Amelia. So I'll hand over to Amelia to do a quick introduction about herself and Spaceframe.
Thanks, Terry. I feel like between you and Sarah, you've got me covered. Look, as I said, my name's Amelia. I'm the Health, Safety and Environmental Manager for a company called Spaceframe Builders. They're a mid-tier Brisbane-based design and construction company specialising in commercial and industrial construction. I, have experience at sort of different ends of business maturity and scale. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing with you some of that experience and how contractor safety management can look a bit different for every business and in different industries as well.
Thanks so much. And that's a really important point, that there is such a sliding scale between where businesses are at and what they need to try and achieve. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail soon as well. So just a reminder, the overall theme of the webinar series is contractor management. How much is too much? And it's often a question that people find themselves asking. I've worked in organisations that don't want to dip their toe anywhere near the water of the contractor. And I've worked with organisations who mandate critical controls and have a really strong grasp of what's happening in that space. And just another reminder, we've made a conscious effort to keep these sessions quite short and sharp, so they do go for about 30 minutes. And as with all sessions, please feel free to get involved. Use the chat. There's a Q&A at the end. So yeah, we'd love to hear your stories as well if you've got some stories around contractor management within the chat. A quick reminder about who we are. So FEFO Consulting. So we're a risk, health and safety advisory firm that was founded out of Sydney, but we're now working across Australia with a presence in each state, which is really exciting. And we do have a really strong partnership network as well, which is growing to international countries, which is really exciting for us. Another thing that is really exciting, you'll see there the big logo down the bottom, the Risk Excellence Awards 2022. So we were recently notified that we are a finalist for the IIRSM Excellence Awards. Now, this was for the SME Risk Initiative of the Year, and this is for the work we did with our sister company, the Health and Safety Index, with the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, which is in the news everywhere at the moment as it's kicking off tomorrow, I believe. So for those of you going, I might see you there. Another quick reminder before we really kick into it. So FEFO have a self-assessment tool that will help you identify your current and desired state regarding contractor management. We won't go into too much detail here, but if you do want some more information or you want to have a chat around how this may help you, please let us know after the webinar. So as Sarah mentioned, there is a poll, which we'll get into now. So the question we're asking today is, should you mandate critical control for your contractors? So I can see there the poll has come up, so if you can please make a choice there. But whilst that poll is happening, Amelia, what's your experience with mandating critical controls?
So, I think that we've heard in previous presentations that the scope and the level of rigour around any contractor safety model is really going to depend heavily on that stage of maturity of that business. So, implementing critical controls is really a proactive approach to mitigating those material unwanted events, and it's one that requires some collective data and insight. So it's something that you might be unlikely to see in a company that might be in the very early stages of its maturity. But that said, once that business approach to safety develops, into priority right through to best in class, what that critical control management strategy looks like will look different with varying amounts of kind of detail and rigor. And I think if I can give some examples of how that looks different at Lendlease, they're obviously, they are a world leader in environmental health and safety management, and they have these global minimum requirements, and they're effectively critical control points that they've got, for all aspects of their business, right from investment through to design, procurement and project delivery. And then when I think about, critical control for Spaceframe buildings, which is where I work now, really in that construction game, in Brisbane, the maturity of our systems, we're kind of in that priority phase where critical controls are focused on those high-risk activities in construction, with the opportunity to kind of diversify into other aspects of our business operations. So,
yeah, great. And looking at the results here, we've had a whopping 94% say that yes, you should be doing that, to a 6% who say no. So I think this might just highlight the difference of the organisations that we have on the call here. So we might have a number of people from a more mature organisation with some significant systems in place, down to some organisations which may not have any critical control program in place at all. Okay. Thanks everyone for participating. That's good. Over to you, Amelia.
Yeah, so last week we heard from Mark and Alex. They covered outsourcing versus insourcing, communicating known hazards for authorities, and software deployment. All of that information is available. Those sessions are recorded, just using the links through FEFO and MyOsh. If we just go to the next slide, this week we will have a look at confirming critical controls, governance, control effectiveness, and methods to calibrate, benchmark, and our performance, so that we can learn and we can see some continuous improvement.
Yeah, thanks, Amelia. And just looking at the chat here, we've got a comment from Philip, who was in the poll looking for the depends answer, which I think is a very valid point. If you want to add some more in there, Philip, around why you're looking for the depends, I think that'd be a great conversation starter as well. Okay, so let's get into a bit of nitty gritty. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is confirming critical controls when working with contractors. So what I'm going to do now is take you through a recent project, a very recent project through FEFO Consulting. And full transparency, I was not involved in this project, but I think it's a really good one to talk through regarding confirming critical controls. So FEFO was engaged to help manage and support the contractor management function of a construction project. So our client, whilst needing support due to resourcing constraints, they also wanted a fresh set of eyes from an external group, which is becoming quite common as well. The scope of our client's project included the preliminary site work, which of course happens for most projects, but also the construction of a vault within a warehouse in New South Wales. So quite interesting. Not too sure what was in that vault, but obviously it's something that needs to be quite secure. So the subcontractors being used did not have a critical control management program in place, which meant they had not identified critical controls for the work. Our client did have a critical control management program in place and had identified the critical controls for the works. So our client wanted to make sure that they were comfortable that the subcontractors were working safely by implementing their critical controls. So I'm going to take you through this graphic. So the graphic shows how we plan to perform checks and reviews over the 5 stages of contractor management. So you can see up here on the top, we've got the who, so we've got our client, and then we've got FEFO Consulting there. Across the top, we've got the 5 stages of contractor management. So we've got source, select, and engage, 2 being mobilize, 3 manage, 4 evaluate, and 5 review and improve. So the responsibility of our client under the first step, being source, select, and engage, was to select the contractor. It was our role to perform SWIMS reviews, which included looking at critical controls. So it was up to us to look at our clients' critical controls, what was required, and then looking at the subcontractor SWIMS and making sure that they were in there as well. It was also our role to look at insurance and police checks and review the safety plan. So as you can see there, that was performed by Mark Wright just recently. As we go to phase 2, which is the mobilize, our client was responsible for the online induction. We were responsible for doing the client project risk register and the contractor briefing. So as you can see there was no reference to critical controls in that phase. When you look at the management phase, our client was responsible for the communication with those subcontractors and also the sign-off of contractor permits, which did include critical controls. It was our role to provide a system for the daily handover and also the daily briefings, which included a critical control review, which is really important. Under section 4, which is evaluate, our client was responsible for performing the periodic site visits. It was our responsibility to provide a system for daily, weekly and monthly checklists, which did include the critical controls as well. So it's really important that's being checked whilst those periodic site visits are happening. I think it's a really important one when you think about critical controls and going to do site visits. And it's something we've spoken about a bit in the past, is going out there with a plan and a specific intent, but also if you're talking to your contractors or even your staff before you go out there, make sure they're aware of the program and what you're there for. It's a really critical one to create buy-in. Another role for us under Evaluate was the verification of WHS records and also the verification of high-risk work, which included the critical controls. Now, as we go to phase 5, which is review and improve, our client was responsible for the project review and finalisation, and a project wrap-up and recommendation for improvements was our role, which included critical control performance. So this is just one example of what a company may choose to do to confirm critical controls are in place for their contractors. So yeah, a live example of a project we've been engaged to do, and it's getting some great results. So I'm just going to go quickly back to the chat because I think it's important to look at what people are saying. We've got Philip here who had the original comment was, I was looking for the depends answer. So he said here, depends on what the principal or PC knows about the risk, depends on the safety maturity of the contractor, depends on the extent to which other contractors are managing the same risk, and we want a uniformed approach. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Amelia?
I think you're absolutely right. Critical control management kind of, I feel, does rely very heavily on having some historic data to reflect on, you know, and depending on that level of maturity of that business, that bow tie assessment, really identifying where those areas are that then will require critical controls to be implemented, you know, may or may not exist. So couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and you said before you've seen the difference between Lendlease and where you are now. So Lendlease, as we know, a world leader in this space. Is Spaceframe implementing critical controls for their contractors at the moment? Yeah,
so we predominantly focus our critical control management, and I'm actually really excited to talk about this in a little bit more detail later on, but we really focus on our highest risk areas in construction and have considered things like our the scale of our business, including our resources that are available to then monitor, review and evaluate those critical controls as well. Critical control points on their own aren't effective unless you have all those other reflective measures in place as well.
Thanks so much. Over to you, Amelia, for the 3 lines of defence.
So I'm just going to minimise that chat as well. So when we look at establishing an assurance program, it does have to consider 3 lines of defence. So when it comes to governance of contractors, we're really looking at, you know, first the operations, which is certainly where we're starting at the company that I, you know, work for now, and then you kind of build out from there. So moving out into support functions like health and safety teams, and then into third-party resources and support there as well. So it's really important to note, though, that there is a difference between management and governance in terms of their actions and their lines of defence. So where governance is really that strategic strategic task of setting organisational goals, direction and accountability frameworks, and then where we talk about management then just being allocation of the resources to kind of support that, overseeing the day-to-day operations and those sorts of things.
For sure. And I think with those 3 lines of defence as well, making sure they're all coming together in some way and communicating and understanding where each of those functions are at is really important. Okay, so Amelia, I guess the key question a lot of people are pondering is how far is too far when it comes to contractor assurance activity?
Yeah, so I mean, we're often going to find that different businesses are able to have different levels of control and influence on contractor activities, and there are a number of factors that really influence that. And I'm kind of going to talk a bit specifically to the agreement and contract levels, that really early kind of engagement piece, where you're thinking about how you're going to manage or what control and influence looks like with each contractor. So things that are really going to affect your level of control and influence at that contract stage are going to include your company's risk appetite. I think that's a really big one. It's a crucial component. It plays a really key role in decision-making process around contractor engagement. So, you know, a really well-defined risk appetite is going to ensure that all of your decisions taken throughout the course of your project are really consistent with your organization's goals. From my experience, most companies are really going to have a very low risk appetite around their highest risk areas, and factors that are going to affect what your risk appetite looks like or what your tolerance looks like might include how well established your contracting management strategy is. So organizations that have that really well established history and experience may then be more comfortable accepting more calculated risk, where less mature companies then might take a greater risk, and that might be for growth or profit or just from lack of understanding of components of, you know, causes and consequences of different material unwanted events. Performance that you want to incorporate into contracts and agreements, you know, is kind of like what metrics are going to indicate success around that engagement. And I think you need to consider, you know, what is required to meet the safety objectives that you have for that contractor scope. And then you're not just considering, you know, how you measure their performance, but you're also kind of setting a threshold, which is like a ceiling limit for what you're going to accept before you're going to stop them from continuing any works, or prompt a critical control review or an investigation in the worst case scenario. And you'll also really need to consider what workplace health and safety resources that you have at your disposal. So really what is your capacity and capability for management of your contractor in terms of being able to influence and control their safety performance, because there is so much involved in the verification activities. There's, you know, a lot of resources required to effectively collect, review and assess that verification of performance information as well.
Yeah, great. A question that I want to pose to you is, what's Spaceframe doing in this space at the moment?
Yes, this is an area that I would say we are increasing our focus on. Where, you know, initially we had focused really in operations, and we're moving into a lot of procurement type assessments. So we're looking a lot more at contractors, you know, previous performance as an indicator for their likelihood of success on our roles, and then focusing on that 20% of our work is where our highest risk in terms of, you know, material safety outcomes exists. We're focusing critical controls in that area where we do have resources to verify and review performance.
Yeah, for sure. And are you looking at what kind of assurance activities are you doing? Have you got third parties coming in as well, or not just yet?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question, and certainly that looks different in every business. So at Spaceframe at the moment, the assurance practices that we have in place, we have operational involvement in terms of site management inspections, regular verification activities and observations by them, you know, really at a grassroots level. Then internally, we have internal audit programs, internal inspections, and then I guess I would call certification audits a type of internal assurance process. We do have an outlook to engage with specialist consulting to then engage more from third party unbiased assessment and kind of gap assessment for where we're at versus where we could be.
And I guess it's quite exciting too, knowing what can be done from your time at Lendlease, and knowing Absolutely. Where you are now at a point in time and where it's going to head is exciting. And I think one thing that Mark always talks about is to try and save some heartache. It's all around that planning. So I'm assuming now you're doing a lot of planning for the future and what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, and by intention and by design, we have, you know, generated a lot of senior management buy-in around this, you know, maturity process around our safety systems. And so we have 6-monthly senior management review around where we're at, goal setting, where we want to be. And that's been really supportive for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's great. I think as well, like on one hand, it's really exciting knowing where you're going ahead, but I think on the other hand, when you've been in that environment before, you just want to get there as well. So it's about, I guess, taking small steps as well to make sure that you do it right is a critical part of it.
Look, that's actually been a really important learning. You know, you can't spread yourself too thin, and really intentionally we focused our efforts on where we thought we had the most influence or the biggest risk initially, and then we kind of diversify from there into the nice to haves and into that best in practice space.
Yeah, great. A lot of good things happening. Okay, so now we're going to look at where to check. So the lifestyle of product and services. So of course, naturally, when we think about where our focus goes, it goes to operations. I think it's just a natural progression we go to. But where else should we focus is the question, and that's going to be different for all different sorts of companies. So depending on your business, the supply chain is an area to focus your attention. And I was going to ask you, Amelia, do you have any examples of assurance activity being performed outside of operations from either a Lend-Lease or Spaceframe point of view?
Yes, certainly. So in previous business that I have experienced, and I've seen a lot of work being done on that really chain of responsibility in transport. It is a complicated area. It's an emerging risk area, and it's something that even at Spaceframe we are looking to work towards better influence on as well.
Yeah, that's a really common one. And it's definitely a sore point for many organisations. But one thing to think about, like I said before, looking at the little icons there, I hope today people on the call get a bit of a sense of where they should be looking or could be looking as well to put some insurance activity. Okay, so I think one thing we can all agree on that seeking feedback from the workforce is vital for many reasons. So one thing that we're finding though, contractors aren't often included when it comes to seeking feedback, and they may be included from a really organic level on site, but from a strategic point of view, it's not often done. So Amelia, does Spaceframe seek feedback from the workforce, and how do they do so if they do?
So we do. And, you know, I kind of want to keep the context of my answer in, you know, that kind of mid-tier builder space. I'm not sure kind of the type of businesses or companies that are on with us today. So just want to keep that context when I give this answer. We regularly discuss and review contractor performance, as will most of you. And then our means for collecting feedback from contractors themselves, though, are pretty informal. So at this point in time, that contractor feedback is really in the form of, you know, relationship management, just checking in with the contractor leads, either on site or pre-procurement. We have kind of like regular engagement sessions with our key subcontract companies as well. It is something that's fairly informal and that we're looking to invest a lot more time and structure around.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point is, you know, there might be some people from organisations here that are doing a lot in this space, but from where you are as a company at this point in time, that's just where you are. And that's the idea is to look at the opportunity now, what you can do. But it sounds like it is quite ad hoc and organic. And yeah, like we said, where you're at the moment, that could be okay, but it's about building on that now, moving forward.
Yeah, completely agree. It's certainly an area where there is some opportunity. You know, we kind of only have just got to the place where we're collecting really good data about that contractor performance. And so that's the organic next step.
Yeah, and these things take time as well. So as mentioned in previous webinars, the Health and Safety Index is a great way for organisations to obtain feedback. And what we're seeing now is many of our clients are starting to use the index for their contractors, or they're asking the question, you know, can this be used for our contractors as well? And the answer is yes, of course. So by using the index for your contractors, it's going to give you some really good insights to what's happening out in the field, what the reality is, but also some of the performance measures as well. So what we're going to do now is look at the recent Health and Safety Index benchmark results. So some of you may have seen another webinar that came out recently with the benchmark results. If you didn't and you want some more information, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to provide those benchmark results. They're really quite interesting and they span over, I think it was 7 industries. by memory. Don't test me on that one. So what we're going to do now is look at the lowest scores that we found. So it's important to note here that the negative questions are reversed. So the higher the percentage results is a better score. So the lowest contractor results from our benchmark data shows that taking shortcuts, we've got the employees in purple at 63% and the contractors at 53%. So a little bit worse performance there. The next one's quite a big difference. The pressure to compromise safety being 46% for contractors and 69% for staff or employees. Health and safety violations, so quite close this one, 66% versus 71%, and workplace bullying being 55%, so a fair bit lower in contractors versus employees at 66%. So Amelia, is there any surprises here for you?
So yes and no, I think, you know, it always depends on the type of business, at the scale and the maturity of that business as to what you probably expect to see in these results. But this really highlighted to me that employees probably rated themselves more harshly around their safety standards, and then also felt that they were more affected by these kind of, you know, negative aspects. I think some of that might be a result of perhaps a more significant amount of care and concern that employees would hold as different to what a contractor might have. And that, you know, that's really something that's unique to internal stakeholders in the business, so employees, where that responsibility is kind of moral or cultural, as well as legislated. That's kind of what stood out to me, that they probably had set a higher standard.
And I think as well, it's important to note that contractors live in a different world to us. They get paid job to job. You know, it's different from employees, so they're under their own time pressures as well to get in, get out, as they say. And what's really interesting is if you're a company that uses the index to look at the contractor scores that you're getting, and then look at your incident performance as well, and see if you can make a link there as well. So thanks for those insights, Amelia. I noticed that it's 11:59, so these do go quite quickly. If you do want some more information from us, you can use these slides afterwards. The links are clickable, so you can find some more information. You can give the index a quick demo. Like I said before, we've got an assurance tool that can help you out as well. There's also the 6 steps to contractor safety downloadable on our website as well. So that's free. Feel free to grab it. And of course, if you want to have a chat to us, feel free to reach out after the webinar.
Thank you, Terry. I'd just like to invite anyone to put any questions into the Q&A panel, and we will get to them. I did share those the 6-part series on critical control that FEFO did last year with various clients of yours, and that was very informative. So there aren't any questions right now. I will share a link to next week's webinar, and that'll be presented by Mayosh, and we'll be showing you how our clients use our software to manage the contractor lifecycle stage, and I'll put that link in here again. And please note that it's now only 2 hours between the eastern states and Western Australia, so they start at 11:30 next week. So yeah, I'll just put that link in. But thank you, Amelia, and thank you, Terry, for today. We'll send the recordings in about 4 hours out, and hope everyone has a great rest of their week.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Sarah, for hosting us.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.